Welcome back to Open House with Mark Siwiec and Corey James Moran, brought to you by the Elysian Homes by Mark Siwiec and Associates, a Greater Rochester real estate podcast. This is episode 168. Mark, how are you today?
I'm back from vacation.
Fresh off from Mexico?
Yeah, look at this.
I'm blinded. It's not the lights in the studio today. I am blinded by the tan.
I tan in the same way that you tan. Yesterday was in a panel discussion, and two people said, "Great tan. Where were you?" And I was so grateful because I'm Polish and I'm Irish, and I don't tan.
Yeah,
I'm like you.
Burn a little bit.
Probably like our guest. I don't know.
Yeah,
probably.
Well, we'll talk about our guest in a second.
Yeah,
I'm actually fresh off vacation as well.
Oh, that's right. Because what happened?
Again, you can tell by my tan.
Yeah, exactly.
Fresh off
and you were
Florida.
actually in Florida, so
craziest thing happened. So my wife and 3 kids are on a return trip from going to visit her 95-year-old grandfather for his birthday, and we're in the Orlando airport, which is chaos.
horrible.
Yeah, not great.
Yeah, no.
And we're about to walk into the security line, and who do we run into? Mark and Duffy. Well,
There we go.
calculate the odds. Chat GPT, calculate the odds of that actually happening. Insane.
But what was really insane was you got in the line immediately.
A different line.
We had to go. We had to get our ticket.
Oh, yeah.
It took us 10 minutes. We came back in line. It got into a different line. We got through before you did. There was some serious injustice being served up there.
I mean, traveling with the stroller.
Oh my
the whole
god!
thing.
Oh my god! But the kids were really well behaved.
Yeah, mostly.
In that moment in time,
They did pretty well.
They did awesome.
That's 7 out of 10 in my opinion.
All
7
right.
out of
Well,
10.
yeah. There you go.
One quick note on the Florida trip before we jump into the podcast. Holy crap. The amount of for sale signs in Florida is insane, right? Everywhere.
So wow.
So we were in Melbourne, Florida for the most of the trip. I swear, I drove by a condo. There was 9 signs in a row. Just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all for one condo. I mean, it was everywhere. It's crazy.
And I'm not quite sure, and I'll just lay it out there because I know we don't have time for this kind of conversation, but I'm not sure if that changes anytime in the near future.
Not with the insurance situation.
Well, the insurance situation and
hurricanes.
Also hurricanes, all sorts of things going on down there. So inevitably, the rest of the United States is going to be going through this metamorphosis, this change in terms of real estate and the value of real estate, how quickly properties are selling, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to take place, and then we will ultimately recover. I'm not quite sure, as a result of all that's playing out in Florida, whether or not Florida has enjoyed the pinnacle of of the value of the homes, and whether or not they're just going to continue to plummet.
I mean, with that much inventory, it's got to. Yeah.
And people just increasingly aren't interested in moving to that godforsaken state. So. Oh, did I say that?
How do you really feel? Coming on the podcast today, the latest with the CPI report. We'll talk about that. We've got our special guest, the CEO of the Greater Rochester Association of Realtors, Jim Yockel, who is kind enough to join us here in studio. And then we're going to end on a positive note, okay? Because there's been a lot of negative floating around for the past few weeks, months, years. 5 things to get excited about for 2025 if you're a real estate agent or maybe in the market as well. Okay. All right?
Oh, wait. I did promise that I was going to shout out to Mike O'Neill.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Mike, I saw him at the conference yesterday, and he says he listens all the time.
Thank you.
And he said that he loves the podcast, and I told him I was going to shout out.
There we go.
Yeah. So, Mike, here's to you. Thanks so much for listening.
You're going old school radio tactic with the shout outs.
Oh, yeah.
Should we do birthdays next?
Sure. Yeah, let me get a phone line installed.
All right, let's jump into the market update really quick. Actually, we've seen a jump, which is a little unexpected.
Well, maybe unexpected, maybe it was expected, but go ahead.
So Monroe County, currently active listings. We were at 437 last week. We've jumped to 460 this week.
Yeah.
And not massive, but huge. It's been declining every single week.
And you would attribute that to
more sitting, maybe, but hang on. We'll see.
Okay, or a post-election sort of like, okay.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it's a little bit of a post-election bump. So.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
A little tiny one again for the 6 county region, 802 last week. We're at 837 right now.
Okay. Still, in the middle of November, that's rather unusual.
Yeah, usually it's dead, right, at this point.
Yeah.
Under contract and pending, that number continues to go down. Last week, we're at 1150 for Monroe County. We're now at 1086. And then for the 6 county region, we're at 1699 last week. We're at 1627 right now.
Okay.
Interest rates.
Oh.
It's not as bad as it was. I mean, it was under 7 there for a hot second. Now, at least at the last look, we were at 7.01. It's down from last week when it was 7.13.
Yeah.
For the 15-year, we're at 6.37. That's down from 6.55.
And we probably won't be able to get into it in this podcast, but maybe next week. At what point in time, I mean, can we anticipate that interest rates will come down? Well, we're going to talk about CPI in just a moment.
Yeah, we'll hit it now. So, yeah, CPI came in. This was actually up a little bit. We were up to 2.6% in October. That is in line with expectations. So that's what they were expecting. So we shouldn't see a lot of movement based on that, you would think?
I'll go into just a little bit of a riff here. The question really becomes, one, what does the next jobs report look like?
Sure.
That's going to dictate what it is that the Federal Open Market Committee will actually do in terms of interest rates in their December, their final meeting, obviously, for the year 2024. But then the question becomes, what happens moving forward? And if Donald Trump is successful, and he controls the U.S. Senate, he controls the U.S. Congress, he controls the U.S.
Unless
Supreme
he keeps
Court.
moving people out of Congress into positions in the cabinet.
Yeah. Great pick on Matt Gaetz as U.S. Attorney General. But anyway, I digress.
We don't have enough time.
So the question becomes, if he is successful in enacting his tariff policy, if he's successful in extending the tax benefits to the wealthiest of Americans, and if his mass deportation of migrants is successful, those three things they are absolutely inflationary. That's not a political statement. That is just fact. That is every economist, every talking head, every pundit is saying that. So how does that impact the 10-year Treasury, and ultimately how does that impact the 30-year mortgage? And are we stuck with a 7 handle throughout the remainder of 2020, throughout 2025? It's
possible.
It's a very, very scary proposition. So once again, Lucy, Charlie Brown, the football, we find ourselves once again in that position. And I'd love, is this a good way to segue?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's bring our guest in.
I am desperate to hear his take because he's nodding over here. So let's go right ahead.
Yeah, so let's bring in Jim Yockel, the CEO of the Greater Rochester Association of Realtors, the GRAR. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Before you weigh in, just really a brief overview of who you are and what the GRAR does.
Sure. I'm Jim Yockel. I've been the CEO for the last 13 years. I've been with GRAR 26 years. Started in 1998.
In what role? What
I was the controller. Started on the finance side.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Was there for about 3 years, and then took over the MLS department, and I was MLS director for 12-ish, and then moved into CEO role in 2010, 2011, around there. Our job here is to support brokers and agents, help you be successful. We're kind of like your back office support. Any question you don't know, your broker can't answer, call us. We're here to provide that answer. If we don't know it, we'll help you find it out. And our job is to kind of reduce the friction in the day-to-day business. Agents have a tough time. Brokers have a tough day-to-day go of it. So we're here to do whatever we can to kind of remove that friction. We could talk a lot about the different programs we do, but what we've taken on this role recently is trying to understand, address, and bring together a coalition to solve the critical housing shortage. All of the things you talked about, all very true in the Rochester market. I'm afraid that the inventory shortage is the only thing that matters. Interest rates can go up or down. Mm-hmm. If there's nowhere for people to move, doesn't matter.
True. Yep.
What happens nationally, I don't follow Florida too much, but knowing that there's maybe a glut of inventory there doesn't change what happens here.
Right.
There are no homes for sale. And it's interesting. We go up 30 or 40 homes. We call it a jump now.
Yeah, right.
I think there should be 2,000 homes for sale in our area.
Yeah.
If we go back 15, 20 years. And there just isn't. So we have spent the last 18 months, Mark, you've been part of it. We've lobbied the county, we've lobbied everybody.
Unsuccessfully, I might add.
Yeah.
But you and I can talk about that offline.
We're getting there. But
Okay,
the solutions are very difficult. And bringing significant amounts of inventory into the market is hard for a lot of reasons we could dig into if you want. But
why do you think it has been difficult? Because it's clearly a problem that's been identified. It's something that needs to happen. Why is there any kind of pushback whatsoever?
It's, I think the number one reason, it's very local. So every town has its philosophy on housing, and some are more open to it than not. zoning, regulations, red tape, slow everything down. Developers,
NIMBYism.
Yeah, NIMBYism slows things down. Developers are, I think, going for the path of least resistance more often than not now, and that tends to be multifamily. There's just an easier approval path, and that's great. We have nothing against rental housing. There's a need for that too, but getting a sizable owner-occupied development approved is really difficult right now. And if you do, the costs between land costs, labor costs, material costs, everything is going up. Regulatory costs go up. So a builder can't build a new home and sell it for less than $450. But that's not the market we need to serve. We need to serve that 200 to 300 market. Yep. So everything is just kind of stuck. And we've worked hard to bring some creative and innovative solutions to the market, but there's a long runway to get those moving.
Well, and you didn't even touch on the fact that there are some developers who can't even get electricity.
Right.
That will service the subdivision that they've had planned for years and years and years on end.
Yeah, there are some that are under some levels of construction who had to stop.
Yep.
Town of Henrietta has no more power.
Yes.
And that's a shocking thing to have to deal with.
Seems
But
No pun intended.
Well done.
Yeah.
Nice. It just seems so silly, right?
Yeah.
That it needs to be this hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should not be. And these town boards really, they're reacting to, from my perspective, and tell me if they're reacting to the 8 noisy citizens of that particular town who are showing up at the board meeting, but they're ignoring the 200 potential home buyers who want these developers to actually begin construction on new residences.
I think you're exactly right. So one of our initiatives right now, we're partnering with the home builders to create an economic impact report for Monroe County. So taking a real project with real cost numbers and real benefit numbers to the town to say, here's what an average home constructed in your town or in the County of Monroe will bring as an economic impact over 10, 20 years. So we can go to the town and say, the developer's asking for 75 homes, you want to approve 50, so those 25 homes, each of them is going to cost you this much in economic impact over the next 10 years. And we think those numbers will be significant.
That's great.
We should have the report in the next couple of weeks. So that kind of counters the NIMBYs. You can empower now the board to say, we hear you and we understand, your view is going to change, there'll be more traffic, but this town needs this economic impact. Yep. And that will hopefully bring more housing online, which gets things moving and allows us to then address that 200 to 300 market with getting people to move out of their existing homes into something more appropriate.
And most everybody listening understands what you say when you're talking about that 200 to 300 market, but in the vernacular, what we're really talking about are first-time home buyers.
First-time home buyers, anything in that middle market. What we're seeing is independent seniors, young professionals, first-time home buyers are all competing for the exact same stock. And that is the smallest amount of stock with the least movement right now.
Yeah, indeed.
It is kind of nuts. I've got a lot for sale in Gates, and I've been fielding a lot of phone calls from people who are interested, but a lot of the plans that they have in store are a tiny home.
Yep.
Not allowed.
Yeah.
Obviously mobile homes not allowed. Someone called yesterday. They wanted to know, can I park my RV there and build a shed? And the town just said, nope, against the rules, can't do it. In America, when we're facing literally a housing crisis and an affordability crisis, why wouldn't we open up every possibility?
But also, why wouldn't we address some of the economic concerns that are expressed by so many Americans?
Yeah.
So build. What is it? I mean, it used to be, and maybe you know the statistic, 17, I used to quote that 17% of the U.S. economy is tied to the real estate industry in one way or another.
Yep.
You build a house, great. You're employing contractors, and you're buying lumber, and you're buying tile, but then you're also buying appliances.
Yep.
So it's 17%. This is, there's a lot to be gained from that.
Yep.
I know we could probably spend the entire podcast talking about just this issue.
Yeah.
Can we segue to maybe a question? We started. I'd love to hear your thoughts in regard to where it is that we're headed in terms of interest rates and interest rate environment in 2025.
It's okay. No one knows for sure.
I think
Not even the economists.
it's hard to say. But I think the things you mentioned, that there are still inflationary pressures in the market. And between now and the inauguration, I think there's some pressure to spend some of the money that was not have been allocated from the Inflation Reduction Act to get that out the door before policy does change. So that's also inflationary. So you may see some short-term boost and then some new programs, more spending. I don't think anybody knows for sure. What I do know is the Fed dropped their rate by 50 basis points and mortgage rates went up.
Yep.
They dropped it by a quarter and mortgage rates didn't change. So the thought that if the Fed keeps dropping rates, mortgage rates are going to go down, I think is not backed up by any kind of reasonable fact. I think it's gonna be a moving target. The Fed won't even tell you. They're backing off. They're saying we have to look at the information. So I think we just expect a range higher than we're used to. But I think part of what you mentioned about this little uptick in listings is there hasn't been a change. And there are people who maybe have been holding off, hoping that when the election happens, maybe the Fed does something, maybe mortgage rates change, and they can't wait anymore.
Yeah. I just wrote my last blog while on vacation. It's going to be in the RBJ this Friday. Mailed out to everybody. And I talk about the third potential force. So you got the president, let's talk Donald Trump, inflationary policies. Then you got Jerome Powell, who is controlling obviously the FOMC and the Federal Reserve. There's a third character or player in this, and they're referred to as bond vigilantes. You saw this?
Yeah.
Bond vigilantes. Yeah. And these are the bond traders who are basically, as a result of their forecasting of inflation to come and where it is that the U.S. economy is headed, they're selling off or they're buying in response to, and they are having a disproportionate impact on where it is that the 10-year Treasury is headed and ultimately what's going on with the 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, and people inside that business tell you that the bond investors are the smart money. They're the ones who do all that's kind of a cue you should follow, because those are the people who have the most at stake and they do their research. So there's things happening that most of us don't understand, but I don't see any strong deflationary signals right now.
I agree.
Yeah, no. We talked about what's to come. How about we take a step back and talk about what's happened specifically this year? Some significant changes were brought on.
Yep. Yeah, we went through the settlement with NAR, and actually, I'd be interested to hear your perspective. What's happening in the market? What I hear is, for the most part, people come to grips with the fact that the buyer agent needs to have this written buyer agreement. People starting to be able to have that conversation. It's different. It's awkward, but it's not that different from what everybody's been doing on the buy side for the last 40 years. So I feel like in general, people are coming to grips with it. But there's no question that first-time home buyers, cash-strapped buyers have been impacted by this. I hear every day somebody who has a buyer who just couldn't come up with the money out of pocket, so they're exiting the market or they're trying to do something creative, and that just makes the situation worse. Luckily for us, we have plenty of buyers in the market, but as a human, it hurts to think about the people who realize I can no longer probably afford to buy a home.
So if you would, maybe we're living in a bubble, but from our perspective, the only two things that have changed are, one, the commission is no longer being listed in the multiple listing service.
I've got to make a phone call now.
Right. Yeah. And then two, we got to have a document signed.
Yep.
But yesterday, this is August, September, October, 3 months in, 3 months in. Yesterday was the first time that I had a client who refused to pay a full 3%.
Yeah,
that was prerogative, and I completely and absolutely support that.
Yeah.
But that was the first time that I think we've encountered that over at Elysian Homes. So are we an anomaly? Are we living in a bubble, or?
Well, it depends. The philosophically or conceptually, I guess, the point was that the buyer's agent should have a conversation with their buyer about how they get paid. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. We probably haven't done a great job of having that conversation with our buyers over the years.
It's usually you're free. What?
Well, yeah,
right?
Someone else is going to pay for me. So I think that's a good thing. And if you're a good buyer's agent, you can share your value. I think you continue to do well. If you can't have that conversation, then you need to figure out how to have that. On the listing side, I think what it's probably doing is it's hopefully spurring the conversation with the listing agent to say, there's lots of ways we could handle this. we may want to offer cooperative compensation. We may want to wait for the buyer to ask for it. We may want to do some combination of things. But it gets to you as the listing agent should have that conversation on what's best for that seller. And in some cases, it may be, we're going to not offer anything up front. We'll see what offers come in, because your job is to get them the best offer possible. If I'm serving a buyer and my buyer has the ability to pay me out of pocket, my offer may be stronger, saying we're not going to ask for compensation.
Competitive advantage for sure.
And so that's where I would land, is have the conversation, figure out what's best for your buyer or seller, and then operate in that vein.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's pretty simple.
My last deal was the first one where the seller wasn't offering the full 3%; they were offering 2%. So now my buyer's picking up 1%.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there
or
you
whatever
go. Okay.
whatever percent anybody's offering. We shouldn't talk about specific
that's right.
percentages since this is a public.
Right,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Hypothetically.
Yeah.
What was interesting last night, without going into actual numbers, what was interesting last night is that this is a property that has been on the market for sale for about 2-3 weeks. And my clients were offering a particular commission. There was an offer that came in below list price, actually, just below list price. And the agent representing the buyer was demanding a 3% commission. Okay. And they were resolute. They were going to get paid the 3%. I had to have a conversation with my client saying, listen, this is the only offer that you've gotten. Now, if there were multiple offers, you probably wouldn't be in this position. So if you want this deal to stick, because this is an agent who's saying that her clients don't want to pay the delta. So they ultimately ended up stepping over the plate and reneged on what it is they had signed with me, which was so.
And I, just to be clear, that's what the government wants. They want agents negotiating their commission to meet the situation, and usually that only goes one way, and that's down. But they feel that's the right thing for consumer protection, and we can agree or disagree with that. But that's where they're headed. And the Department of Justice has not moved an inch. They think agents in general pay too much. They think that every buyer or seller should have the ability to negotiate their commission directly with their representative.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
You just spent a few days in Boston.
I did. That was my vacation.
Yeah. So what were you doing in Boston, and tell us what happened there?
We had the National Association of Realtors annual conference in Boston. I was there for 6 days. I didn't get a tan because it was gray, and I was inside the whole time.
You look the same as us, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Do you tan?
I do. Most of my lineage is from Sicily, so
there we go.
We tan pretty well.
Yeah, there we go.
It was an interesting set of meetings. If you've been following NAR, you know that there's been a lot of challenges over the last couple of years.
Really?
They have been quiet on direction or guidance, or even giving us hope that they're going to get it together. And I understand part of that. They've been involved in many, many lawsuits and lots of things. So this week we started to hear for the first time the beginnings of a plan for how they're going to move forward and how they're going to represent us. They've been talking a lot about rebuilding trust with agents and with brokers, maintaining their core services. I will give NAR great credit for their work in advocacy, especially at the federal level. They are a really strong voice in Washington to promote homeowners' rights, to promote ourselves as an industry, to promote housing as an option. A lot of what they do kind of falls under the radar of the average agent on the street, and many people will say, I don't know that we need them. And so NAR's hearing that, and they're saying, we've got to rebuild that trust. We have to prove to you what our value is, and they say they're going to do it.
Do you think, so my sense is that they had what they viewed as a prescribed job or set of things that they needed to do day in and day out, year after year after year after year.
Yep.
And then suddenly, when it is that the world changes and you got the DOJ coming in, they found themselves flat-footed. They found themselves incapable and unable to actually represent agents, and now Clear Cooperation is just another example of something new and different is being thrown their way, and they just don't know how to proceed or behave. Is that accurate?
I think mostly this issue with the DOJ and the federal government has been going back decades, like 40, 50 years. Real estate is the largest self-regulated industry in the world, and we represent 17% of GDP and trillions of dollars of asset value. And I think the government doesn't like that we're self-regulated. And NAR, I think, has they got a little bit comfortable and they got a little bit kind of full of their own importance, and they didn't make some great decisions. And a lot of that kind of fell into areas that they probably should have done better. And that's where the government comes in and says, you're not doing the job, so we're going to help you make some change. So we'll see. I think there's a path for them to make those changes, to focus a little bit more on the core things. There's been some mission creep, and they got into some things they probably didn't need to get into. And they'll kind of right-size the organization, focus on serving agents, serving brokers, providing education, providing advocacy, providing a networking platform where people can go and learn from each other. So I think there's still value there.
Can you, you may not have the answer to this, but earlier in the year we were reading that the NAR was sitting on over $1 billion in assets. And do you know how much of that has been spent down and how much they might still have remaining in their coffers? In other words, moving forward, is there going to be a willingness from your perspective to actually spend some of that $1 billion to do a better job of representing us?
Yeah, I guess it depends how you look at it. They have a building in Washington, D.C. that's a block or two from the Capitol that's highly valuable, brand new.
Gorgeous building.
Yeah, so that may be a big chunk, but they have a building right in the middle of the Miracle Mile in Chicago that probably has a really high value. As far as cash, I don't know that it's that much, and they're going to spend half of their cash, $418 million in settlement. So I think they're going to be forced to streamline. It wouldn't surprise me if they sold one of their buildings to generate some cash. But we'll see what they end up doing. They said they're going to have a balanced budget next year, and dues for NAR are not going to go up in 2025. After that, we'll have to see. But we'll try and support them as much as we can. But when it comes to local brokers and agents, we're here to support you what you need, and we'll continue to do that no matter what happens with NAR.
Corey, you mind if I jump in with one more question?
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
Thanks. Last question that I have in regard to Boston. Clear cooperation. What ended up? What was the conversation? And for those who don't know what clear cooperation is, do you want to just give a real quick overview?
Clear cooperation simply says if you are going to publicly market a listing, it needs to be in the MLS within 24 hours of you publicly marketing it. So if you take a listing, owner's not ready for people to see it yet, you can sign the contract, protect yourself, it's under contract. You don't have to put it in the MLS as long as you're not marketing it. But the minute it goes
outside of your brokerage.
Yeah, inside your brokerage, talk to your agents, talk to your existing clients. But once it goes on Facebook, once you put it on your website, once you start putting it out there, a sign goes in the yard, you're starting handing out flyers, then it has to be in the MLS so that every other professional with their buyers has a chance to take a look at it.
Yeah. Okay. And so
we are 100% supportive of clear cooperation. I think the compensation piece I would say is a convenience of the MLS. Knowing that there's a contractual agreement to pay the other side was helpful, but I don't think that destroys the industry or the value of the MLS. Having a complete, comprehensive listing database of all the available homes for sale is critical to what we do. And imagine going back to when every broker has their own listings, and you don't know what they are unless you call that broker. Talk about making phone calls just to find out what's for sale.
Right.
I think is a problem, and that's what the rest of the world has. You walk down the street in another country, and there's a listing or an agency that has 10 listings on their window. That's all you know. You have to walk another couple blocks to see the next 10, and then you have to walk a mile to see the next 10. It's just not functional. And so I think we can find a way to give brokers a little more flexibility in their marketing, understanding that some homeowners need different things. But the core of what we do, what makes this system work for consumers, is the seller being able to promote their listing as broadly as possible to as many buyers as possible, get the most offers for the highest money. And for a buyer to go one place and see everything that's available to remove any discrimination concerns.
I hate clear cooperation.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yep.
But I would love to see a change in clear cooperation so that the 24 hours is extended to, let's call it 72 hours, or let's call it 1 week, because in our brokerage, we deal with Rochesterians who have high profile.
Yep.
And there have been, one just recently took place, and then there was one a few years ago. These are individuals who would much rather allow me the opportunity and the privilege of marketing their home quietly so as not to call attention to themselves. And if it doesn't work after a week, then terrific.
Yeah.
Do you see do you see any movement toward that type of model?
I think that's the conversation that NAR is having internally right now, is what is the appropriate time frames? And it could be 36, 72, it could be longer. I don't know where the sweet spot is, but fully understand that there are sellers who that's what they want. And if they're fully informed and they understand that they may be foregoing some offers, fine. It's not up to us to tell the seller how to sell their home. On a global perspective, I think it's important to have some consistent rule. And if it's 72 hours, I don't think there'll be an adjustment. I don't think the market crashes because of that. But everybody needs to know what the parameters are so we can all operate within them to serve the consumers properly.
Jim, you mentioned the multiple listing service. Is there any plans to improve, reinvent? What do we see going forward for the MLS?
That's a difficult question to answer. The MLS, I mean, it's a database, and it's hard to improve on a database. So CoreLogic has been pretty good. They're streamlining the interface, trying to make it simpler, less confusing, more efficiencies. Do one thing in one place, and it feeds through the whole system. So you'll see, I think, some pretty good improvements in that in the next few months. CoreLogic, I've seen demos of some new tools where they're adding augmented reality and artificial intelligence to this. So
you brought up AI. Tack on another 45 minutes of the podcast.
But I think very soon, maybe by the first quarter of next year, you'll be able to, through a Realist, using your phone, pull up a listing and see a lot line, augmented reality laid over the actual live camera view, so you know, that tree's on this property, that tree's on that property. So cool stuff like that. It's hard to make the MLS too much better as far as its database function.
Sure.
But we'll see these other technologies roll in. There's some where there's a rule that says the pictures have to be accurate, and you can't stage a photo and pretend that it's the real photo. But now there's a tool where there's a slider. So you have the real room, and then you push the slider, and it shows you a fully staged room.
Oh, interesting.
That could be different, different paint. So that's cool because it's true, but it gives you some vision. And so those are the things that are coming next.
We talked about this probably months ago, Mark. There was one MLS, I think it was Nashville had this, where the search function was utilizing AI, and you could write in if a client of mine says, I want a red brick house, that's not necessarily something I can just plug in an MLS, with a slate roof or all these different things.
Yeah.
You could actually do that and get a search result for it.
So that's another thing. Artificial intelligence, especially viewing photos, is going to be the next wave to streamline the consumer experience, where you can say, I want granite countertops and a red brick house, and it will scan all the photos and it will bring back results that match that.
I think that Surhant actually just launched a platform just a few weeks ago.
Could be, yeah.
They just outlawed that displays this kind of thing, which is fantastic.
Yeah, but those things exist and they work. It's just getting the information into it. So you have to load all those photos into this tool, and that takes time. And then there's working out the kinks. But
there's so much. There's so many opportunities for you to say monthly energy costs. The monthly cost of RG&E. That would be really, really helpful.
I agree, and I think what is the bigger threat to our industry is people resisting that kind of information, because there will be just as many people who say, I don't want to represent a home where I have to tell people what the energy cost is, as people who say, my buyers want to know. We had this, there was, I forget what it was called, that was like Carfax for homes 6-7 years ago. Nobody wanted it because then you know what all the problems are, and now you know what all the problems are. And there are people who was like, I don't want to know. So we're our own worst enemy sometimes. We should be thinking from the consumer standpoint, what's best for the seller, what's best for the buyer. Information is information. So we don't want to be the gatekeepers of things that can help the other side. We don't want to be pushing away things that maybe seem a little scary.
National MLS?
Not anytime soon. It's just really hard. It's really hard to do the compliance work. It's hard to aggregate anything. I think you'll see more data shares. You'll see more markets partnering where it makes sense. Where people move, then information should move more freely. I just don't think anybody has the capacity to do
not even Zillow. And the reason I say that is because Zillow is this aggregator of all this information. But if we're if we're data inputting the number of bedrooms and the number of baths in a particular manner, but Maricopa County out in Arizona is inputting it differently, that's really hard for Zillow, and that's why it is we have problems on occasion with IDX, Internet Data Exchange.
And that's the role that the local MLS plays. We clean out all that information, we solve the problems, we feed it up to the aggregator, and they aggregate it because the work has been done. I don't think anybody is dying to take over that compliance data quality work. And that's kind of the secret sauce that makes it work for brokers and agents, is you don't have to worry about that too much.
We addressed, what you thought might happen in terms of interest rates for 2025. What's your overall broad picture of what you envision happening with the market, specifically here in Rochester? Again, difficult question to ask. But.
I think that everything comes back to the inventory, the number of homes for sale, and the willingness for people to put their home up for sale. I don't see any of that changing potentially for years. We did an analysis of building permits over time. The short story is since 2005, we have seen 17,000 fewer building permits in Monroe County than the norm would have been through the 80s and 90s. And that's a massive amount of homes that were never built. So that's a big piece of it. But people are living longer. They're healthier longer. They're staying active longer. They stay in their homes. If I'm an empty nester and I'm looking to downsize, I look at a townhouse. What am I going to get a nice townhouse for these days? $400,000.
Sure, yeah.
So if I'm an empty nester, do I want to leave my paid off home that I raised my family in to take on a 30-year mortgage to have a smaller space in a place that I didn't live for the last 30 years? And they're saying no. So I think it's somewhere near 28 million homes in the U.S. are occupied by people using less than half of the space.
Wow.
That's a crazy number.
It's crazy. Zillow did a study. I think 33% of 3-bedroom and up homes are owned by empty nesters.
Wow.
So that's the problem. So we can't build homes to sell them for between 200 and 300, but we can build independent senior living that is maybe more affordable. So those folks leave their current houses that maybe do fall in that 200 to 300 range. So we've got to be creative in how we solve this problem. But it's going to take a long time, and giant projects aren't on the cards. So it's going to be a little bit here, a little bit there. We're going to need to convince towns like Gates that a few tiny homes are okay.
Yeah.
A few accessory dwelling units are okay. We're not going to advocate for thousands of them, but if Gates had 20 ADUs or tiny homes, no one's going to know, but it solves a need. And that's how we're going to solve this. Little bits here, little bits there, get the market moving, and then let the kind of natural market forces take over.
Well, this might be a good opportunity to segue into an article that we read in Inman, which is the forecast of 5 positive things for agents to focus on as we approach the year 2025.
Yeah.
And so I'll kick off the first one that I find kind of interesting. They're suggesting that a full 8% of all agents are going to leave the industry in the year 2025. Now, if we've got about 3,500 or so agents selling real estate in the 6 county region, that would translate to about 280 agents leaving the business. Let's call it 300. Yeah. Does that seem reasonable to you?
I think that's fair. I've heard people say as much as 10%. I think NAR said they have kind of a backup plan for losing 10% of the agents. We're doing our budget for next year now. We always budget to lose more agents than we think. So we're in that 8 to 10% range, just so that we know that we can operate. For GRAR, we're not concerned with the number of agents. We'll serve whoever we have. If it goes up, great. If it goes down, we'll serve those who are left. But I think with market forces, with tight inventory, with years of buyers agents being just beaten up and just emotionally drained, it wouldn't surprise me if some of them said.
The statistic that 50% of all agents nationally sold one or fewer homes last year, and then 60% sold, what is it, 2 homes or fewer?
Yeah.
Yep, under 3 for sure. Yeah.
How the hell do you put bread on the table?
Just keep in mind, a good chunk of them may be on teams. And so there's that, and that's really hard to quantify. Mm-hmm. Some are just entering the business. Some are 40-year agents who refer most of their business out. Some people are second career and they only serve family and friends. So it's hard to quantify what the active kind of full-time agent
but nevertheless,
does.
active full-time agents are, especially if you're newer to the business. I think the statistic that I just recently read was that 40% of all agents currently practicing weren't practicing before the year 2020.
Yeah. And that bears out in our
Wow,
market.
really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
40%. And
big number.
so all of a sudden, there were the glory years, immediately after COVID.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden it's like, okay,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, roll up your sleeves because this is not easy shit.
Right. It's hard work.
So-
And those numbers are pretty comparable to what we see in our market. And so there'll be a different kind of agent, maybe. New agents coming into the business is always strong. We get 350 to 400 a year. So I'm not worried about that. That doesn't seem to be changing much. People don't love to retire from this business. They kind of hang around. And so it's hard to decide, which is kind of why 10, 12 years ago, we just said, we're not going to obsess about the number of agents. We're going to make sure our budget works. We're going to try and keep costs low, but we're going to serve you in the way that we think you need to be served, and we'll take whoever is in this business.
I'm not sure if we get time for all five. Do you want to touch on another?
We touched on some already, honestly. Technology. We've talked about AI. Obviously, that's going to be huge. One of the things is, the forecasts are positive somewhat. From an interest rate standpoint, maybe a little grayer now than it was when this was written.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I find interesting is, at least from an inventory aspect, there's going to come a time eventually where these people that have the golden handcuffs, the ones that are sitting on the 3% rates, are not going to be able to wait anymore, and they're going to have to sell.
Yep.
It's been 4 years of this already.
Yep.
When do we start to see that trickling in?
I think that is purely a matter of life happens, things happen, and you would prefer to keep your 2.5 rate. But if you're taking a new job, you're moving, and you're going to buy a house at 6, I think you're upset. But it's not going to be devastating.
Well, and I think the forecast point of the fact that come year's end, 6 weeks from now, we will have sold nationally about 4.7 million homes, and at least 5 forecasts that are referenced. There are more than 5 million homes projected to be sold. And, the low number is, I think, 5.1 million. The high number is like 5.7 million. So it looks and actually maybe whether or not this still holds true. But a few months ago, I've been touting the fact that Rochester has been named the number 2 municipality in the country in terms of the influx of new properties slated to come on the market for sale. Do you have anything new in regard to that?
I haven't seen that. I'm not seeing it in the numbers. I will say Realtor.com almost every month lists us as like in the top 5 for shortest days on market, for tightest inventory. That's been 3 years. I don't know of anything that would make me think there's going to be a huge influx of new inventory.
Okay.
We're working hard to make that happen, and really we feel that's one of the best things GRAR can do for our members is help spur new inventory and give you something to sell for the next 30 years. But it's a long, slow process.
Well, I think this is Redfin that had published this study. So, let's hope and pray to God that Redfin is correct in their assessment.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's the final little talk about for reasons to be excited about the real estate business heading into 2025. Spring always comes after winter. So it's been so bad, it's got to eventually get better just by the laws of logic, right?
We would hope.
what goes up comes down.
Eventually?
Or what goes down comes up. I don't know.
We'll see. I don't see anything that's going to materially change what we've seen the last few years. I'm trying to change that, and I'd be glad to be wrong, and there'd be another 500 listings in the spring. Other than the people who've been waiting can't wait any longer. But there are factors pushing things the other way too. I think, as healthcare improves, people are healthier, active longer, and they're resisting moving out of their homes longer. We've seen the average turnover went from 7 years to like 12 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And, that's a factor, especially when we're not adding new housing into the mix.
Yeah.
Mark, anything else you want to ask Jim?
No. This is awesome. You literally are our first guest with the third chair. And it's funny, independently, both Corey and I, when we were putting together a list of people that we wanted, you were the number 1 guest that he wanted. You were the number 1
We had a
guest
draft.
on my list.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and you did not disappoint. This was fantastic.
Can I put a
Thank
quick
you.
plug in for our
Oh,
AI
please,
tool?
yes,
So
absolutely.
I know
Yeah.
you guys love AI. Really exciting. GRAR partnered with a technology company called VoiceFlip to create an artificial intelligence member knowledge base available 24/7 in 25 languages. So this is first in the industry. It's really great. We launched it. Look in your email for more news about it. But you can text, use WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, call 24 hours a day. Ask anything you would ask our member services
I
reps.
speak Swahili. Will it help?
It will answer you. I don't know if Swahili for sure, but it answers in Mandarin and Cantonese and Spanish and Italian.
25 languages.
25 languages. It's really cool. First of its kind in the industry. We are now in the process of licensing it to other associations across the country. But I say that because it's a great member support tool, but it's also the GRAR has been actively looking to grow our technology to really improve your day-to-day lives. But now we're investing in the future, and this becomes a non-dues revenue source for us, which helps us moderate costs or invest in other products that do help agents and brokers day to day on the street. So we're doing everything we can to continue supporting every one of you, and this is a really exciting piece. I'm proud of it. You'll probably see press releases as we sign up. We have a handful of associations in contracts to license this tool. Developed. Yeah,
I would love to test drive a beta copy of that.
I'll give you the number. Yep.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining
my
us
pleasure.
as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for watching or listening. We'll talk to you again next time.